Let's just work through one last use case on the problem of finding the max element in a list here. So let's just work maybe through this problem right here. So let's say if a equals to this list to begin with 4, 1, 10, and minus 1, let's just create these three columns. Let's just create these three columns, which is this indicator uh, that my loop invariant holds at those various points in my source code. Okay, so I have these four columns here, and these four columns are these points here. One, that's my two, this is my three, and this is my fourth point there. Okay, and this is my loop invariant here. So given this loop invariant, what I'm saying now is that loop invariant must hold at point one. Let's see whether it actually holds at point one. So at point one, what's I? So at point one, I've got my I equals to 1. I've got my max element. Let's just use ME for short. That's for max element. Max element is equal to whatever is A of 0. What is A of 0? A of 0 is 4. Okay. What does I actually point at? The loop invariant tells me that I is pointing at that portion of the list that hasn't yet been looked at, meaning everything from this point on hasn't yet been looked at. If I haven't looked at that portion of the list yet, what is it that I have already looked at? What I've looked at is just this portion. What I've looked at from that portion, what is the current max element? The current max element is 4. Okay, that is consistent with my loop invariant, so my loop invariant holds at point 1. What is my loop invariant at point 2 telling me? Well, at point 2, I still have my I as 1. My max element at this point is still 4. Okay, and it's still consistent. That's the only piece of the list I've looked at so far, and my max element so far is still 4. So far, so good. What happens now in the body of the loop? In the body of the loop, I'm saying if a of I is greater than max element. So I'm currently looking at 1. Is 1 greater than 4? Well, 1 is not greater than 4, meaning this condition is false. If that condition is false, the body of this piece doesn't get executed, and I'm just going to do at this point, I'm just going to do I++. So I believe I just had a slight typo in my earlier video. That arrow shouldn't be over there. It should just be right after I++. Okay, that's what this 3 is. This 3 is pointing at that portion which is just after the body of my loop here. So the body of the loop is 1, 2, and this piece in orange there. Okay, so what is it at 3? At 3, at point 3, my I at this point, what is my I at this point? I at this point is 2. Okay, meaning if I is 2, I is currently pointing over there. What is the list I've looked at so far? The list that I've looked at so far is 4 and 1. What is the current max element in the list that you have looked at so far? So far, my max element at this point hasn't been changed because this piece of the code never got executed, and because that piece of the code never got executed, my maximum element is still 4. Okay, and this also makes sense because if this is a list I have looked at so far, from that list, the best I have at this point is still 4. Okay, so what happens to the loop now? The loop the conditional loop gets checked. Is I less than length of a? Length of a at this point is length of a always means constant. Length of a is 1, 2, 3, 4, and because I is still less than, in this case, less than 4 over here, what happens is when I'm going to check point 2 of my source code, I still have I equals to 2. My maximum element at this point is still 4. And at this point, I'm doing A of I is A of I greater than max element. I is currently pointing, I in this case is pointing at 2. So if I is pointing at 2, well, 10 is greater than maximum element. That's true. Max element equals to A of I. So my max element now is currently equal to, this gets changed to 10. Max element is now 10. I'm doing I++. I has incremented to 3. I is now 3. Okay, what is my loop invariant at point 3? At point 3, my loop invariant says that my I at this point is 3. Maximum element at this point is 10. Okay, let's just compare that. If I at this point is 3, meaning I is pointing to 3, which is this index value. This is index value 3. Okay, that's my index value. Let's use IV for short for index value. And the list that I've looked at so far is everything up to I minus 1, meaning just up to this point. What is the maximum element in that list that you have looked at so far? The maximum element in the list that we've looked at so far is 10, and this is what I have here. I have 10 so far in my loop invariant. My loop invariant is holding correctly at point 3. Okay, let's just go with the Boolean condition in my while loop. Is I less than length of A? Length of A is 4. 3 is less than 4. So far so good. What happens at point 2? Well, at point 2, I still have I equals to 3. My maximum element is still 10. This is consistent with my loop invariant. Everything is good. Is A of I greater than max element? A of I is minus 1. Is minus 1 greater than max element? No, it isn't. Meaning that this piece of the loop, this piece of the condition doesn't get executed. I'm just going to do I plus plus. I at this point becomes 4. So at 3, at this point 3, I have I equals to 4. And I've got my maximum element still set to 10. Okay, what happens to the condition of the loop now? Is 4 less than 4? Is I, remember I at this point is 4, is 4 less than 4? This is false. Because this is false, the loop breaks, and because the loop breaks, if I look at point 4, point 4 is just this point just before the return statement executes, just at that point right there. At that point, the loop invariant must also be true. So if I just look at the point just before the return statement gets executed, I have I equals to 4, and my maximum element at this point is still 10, and this is consistent with my loop invariant, because if I is now 4, right, it's pointing at this space right here. Okay, which means that everything up to I minus 1 has been looked at. Everything up to I minus 1 has been looked at, meaning I currently have the maximum element. Whatever the maximum element that I'm using as a local variable should contain that value, which is the maximum of the list that has been looked at. Okay, in which case the maximum element is 10, and I'm just going to return back whatever is the max element back to whoever called this function.